And welcome to our first screencast on Solidworks tutorials. So on your desktop you should see an icon that looks like this, Solidworks 2014 64-bit, and you'll double click that of course to launch the program. When that begins, it'll either launch the Student Edition if you're on your own computer, or in the labs it could launch the Student Edition, or it could launch the Education Edition. And they are slightly different, but for our purposes they will be equivalent. You may get a software license agreement that it asks you to read and accept, and then you may get a question on whether you want to show dynamic help or quick tips along the way. Quick tips will later show a dialog box that looks like this at different points in the program, and it can be helpful, but I find that many computers do not run it properly, including the computer I'm doing this screencast on, and so it's not terribly important, and it's also not important which one of these you pick. I'll show you later on how to turn this on or off. And then finally, SolidWorks will start and load into its blank screen. And once SolidWorks has completed loading, you probably see a screen like this. There's a few things we can do to configure it. So if I move my mouse next to the SolidWorks name, you'll see 4 more drop-down menus will fly out. And these are often helpful to keep out. So if you click on the little pin next to the Help icon or the Help menu, then those menus will now stay out along with the new and open menus, etc. On the right here, this is called the task pane, and there's one item here we'll be using, and that's the house icon. So that's called resources. If you click that once, then you'll see this pane show up, and that might have shown up already when you started. If you want to keep this out, you would click that little pen icon in the upper right hand corner, and that will keep that out. Otherwise, I'll unclick it and you can get rid of it by simply clicking on the gray window in the middle. So this task pane is useful in particular because of the tutorials. So SolidWorks is very good at helping beginners learn it from scratch. And if I click on this tutorials, it will now split the screen. And so I have my old SolidWorks window here, and on the right I have a set of guided tutorials for learning the entire program. You can see there's a number of tutorials here, and they're organized into different segments. We have the Getting Started, Basic Techniques, Advanced Techniques. We'll be doing some of these Getting Started tutorials in other videos, but for today I'd like us to just get a feel for how the SolidWorks interface works operationally. And so I'll be closing this tutorial, and when I do that, you may find that your screen expands back to the full size. If it doesn't, you can just drag it back. And so we can now close out the SolidWorks Resources tab. So with the pin unpinned, just click anywhere on the gray area, and now we have our full screen back. So let's make our first part. Go to the New icon and click it, or Control N. You can see I have 3 options here: part, assembly, or drawing. Almost always you'll start with a new part. An assembly is a collection of parts put together in an assembly, and a drawing can be of an assembly, or it can be of a part or a group of parts, but generally you always start with a part. And you'll click OK. Now if this is the first time using your computer, when you click OK, you won't see that screen. You'll see this dialog box, and this is to set the units and dimension standard. And so I would suggest for this class 101 and most work that we do at USD that we use the IPS system, that's inch, pound, and second for the units, and the ANSI dimension standard. That refers to the drawing template. So this is for the model and the drawing and the assembly. This is for the drawing template. Once a template is set the first time, then every time you click on a new part, it will automatically default to these. You can always change them later, and it tells you how right there in Tools, Options, Document Properties. And then you would click OK, and then it would take you to this screen. Okay, so working our way down the screen, here are some other things that are good to know about. In this region right here, you might have the quick tips shown, and those would be visible if you see this kind of a window showing in your area right here. If you want to turn those on or off, if your computer is supporting that feature, then you would click the question mark icon. That would turn that quick tip on or off. Right next to that, we have our control over units. So you can see the inch, pound, second system is selected. That's the default for how I have this computer set up. If you click the up arrow, then of course you could change to the millimeter system for other types of parts. But for most of the work we do at USD, the inch system is actually most convenient. I'm working our way around the screen. This is called the triad, and this of course, as you can see, shows the X, Y, and Z orientation of the current view. And there's nothing to show here, so this won't necessarily make sense, but it will later. Working our way up, here's a very important part of the SOLIDWORKS display. This section here is called the Feature Manager Design Tree. So you can see it's organized like a tree, and as we add features to our model, they will show up below this blue line. They will occupy this space. So right now we have a blank one. We just have the part name. We have a material which we haven't specified, and we'll do that later. There's a front plane you can see there, a top plane, a right plane, and an origin. And you see the little orange dot right in the middle of the screen for the origin. So this feature manager is very important. Next we have some tabs. You see there's a Features tab, a Sketch tab, an Evaluate tab, and a Dimension Expert tab. The main ones we'll be using are Features and Sketch, and occasionally we'll use Evaluate, really just for one button, and that's the Measure button. So it's very important to pay attention to which tab are you in, the Features or the Sketch. So what's the difference between the two? Features are three-dimensional objects. Sketches are two-dimensional objects. And all of the features are built from two-dimensional information. So typically the process will be, we'll start with a three-dimensional extrusion. And so an extrusion is like what a Play-Doh machine would make, or some pasta machines would make, and we'll see what those look like soon. That's going to be based on a two-dimensional sketch. So let's get some practice on how to make an extrusion. So we'll be in the Features tab, and we'll click on Extruded Boss Base. And you might be wondering, what is a boss and what is a base? So let me first go back to the tutorials just to show you a picture to explain what those mean. So you see in this Lesson 1 parts, a base could be considered the main body of this part, the back half, and a boss would be anything that sticks out from that. So they're both extrusions, and one of them is made as the first item in the part, and the other is made after it. So that's the only distinction. So now I'm going to get rid of tutorials because we're going back to actually making this. So I'll click on Extruded Boss Base. Now you see the screen changed. First, it's the Feature Manager tree disappeared temporarily. It's actually still there. You see there's other tabs here. If I click on this tab, that brings the feature tree back. So it hasn't gone, it's just hidden. Now I can go back to the Extrude Feature Manager. And you can see it has a yellow box here. Anytime SOLIDWORKS shows a yellow box in this region, means that it's asking you for information that it needs to proceed. So let's read what it says. Select a plane on which to sketch the feature cross section. So you see 3 planes are shown, front, right, and top. And for our purposes, it does not matter which one we pick. But notice what happens. I'm going to click the top plane, and notice what happens to the display. It just reoriented itself so that I'm looking squarely at that top plane. And another way I know that is that my triad down here is looking straight down the y-axis. Another thing it did is that it kicked us into the Sketch tab because it knows this is the next thing we need to do. So in the Sketch tab, we have our main controls are this set right here. This is how we'll be sketching entities, they call them. And a rectangle is a nice one to start with. You may have, there's different types of rectangles, there's different ways to control a rectangle. I'm going to click the little down arrow next to that square, and you can see you can define a rectangle based on corners, a bottom left corner and an upper right corner. You can also do it based on the center of the rectangle and then an outer corner. And I believe the default is the corner, so I'm going to choose that one because that's probably what you have. Okay, and so it's been selected now that I clicked that. And we have some more controls here that are not terribly important. When I pull my mouse into the window, notice that the pointer has changed. It's now a pencil, and it's a pencil with a little symbol of that rectangle below it. And that just means it's reminding you this is the operation it's about to complete. Now when you place your first item in a sketch, it's usually helpful to place it at the origin of the sketch, and that is in this little red system right here. And if I hover the pencil pointer near the origin, you can see the orange dot appears. So this is very helpful because you don't have to zoom in on the origin to make sure you're clicking exactly on the origin. As long as the orange dot appears, it knows that you intend to click exactly on the origin, and that's what it will do. Another cue that it's magnetized, if you will, to the origin is that notice when I move the mouse pointer close to the origin, near the bottom right of that mouse pointer, by the eraser of the pencil, you'll see that little green dot with two lines. And that green dot means that it is magnetized, if you will, to a defined point. Okay, so we're ready to place two corners of a rectangle. The first corner I suggest you do at the origin, and the next corner just pull away in any direction. You could go left, bottom, or so on, but I usually go up to the right. And these are the initial dimensions of the rectangle. Now normally in three-dimensional CAD we actually don't try to hold or use the mouse pointer at this point to make, let's say I wanted to make a 1x2 rectangle. We don't do it by trying to hold the height to 1 and the dimension to 2. There's much better ways to do it. So simply make the rectangle in the shape you want and then click again to define that upper right corner, and that will complete the rectangle operation. Now later on we'll show you how to make that dimension, how to dimension these exactly, but for this screencast I just want us to get a feel for how features are made. So we are going to complete this rectangle operation by clicking this little green check in the upper left here. In other words, it has enough, so if it shows a green check, it means it has enough information right now to complete that operation. You could add more information, but you don't have to, and so I'm going to click the green check. That will get me out of rectangle, and that puts me back into the sketch operations. Now certainly I could add more features to this sketch and make it an extrusion, but for now I just want to get a feel for how the program works. So we're going to exit this sketch. We have enough information to make an extrusion, so let's exit the sketch by clicking on that. And now it has kicked us back up to the boss extrusion operation, the base or boss extrusion operation that we started about a minute ago. So you can see it's reoriented the view to more of an isometric view. You can see that from the triad and the appearance. The light blue is the sketch that we just made, and the yellow is the extrusion that it is making from this sketch. Now you might wonder, well, how far does it want to extrude? And there's two ways to control that. One of them is right here in this this box right here. So 1/10 of an inch happens to be the default for how this was set up. I could type in a different number, for example. I could type in 2 inches, And there we have a much larger extrusion. Now you can see it's off the screen, so what do I do here? So this is where the heads-up view toolbar is very helpful. If I hover my mouse on the leftmost icon, you can see it says zoom to fit. And if I click that, it will automatically resize the view so that I can see the model. To control the height of that extrusion, this is one way. The other way is simply click on the arrowhead, and you can see you get a little scale, and that scale will move, and you can change and make that extrusion as large or as small as you want. Okay, so there's our first extrusion made from a sketch, and we're ready to complete that, and we'll click the green check again to complete the boss extrude or base extrude operation. And now that we've done that, you see that in the feature manager design tree, we now have the boss extrude as our first feature in the tree. The features shown here in light blue, that's the original sketch that we had. That sketch still exists. If you click the little plus icon next to that boss, you'll see sketch 1. It appears right there. If you don't want to show that, just click anywhere in the blank space, and that now disappears. If you want to show it again, click back on sketch 1. Okay, so let's see if we can repeat that. First, let's unselect the sketch 1. Just click anywhere in this background area. And now let's click on extruded boss base again to start a new extrusion. Once again, a yellow box appears. It's asking for information. Now, since we now have a base to work with, the yellow box has a little bit different information. It says to select a plane, a planar face, or an edge on which to sketch the cross section. And so typically what's done at this stage is to select one of these faces, any face you want. I'll pick the top one just arbitrarily. Okay, now we are in the sketch menu. You can see, and we have our usual sketch controls because it's ready to make this second sketch. So I could make another rectangle on top of this one. It's going to make it on this white region right here. So I click that corner rectangle, and just as before, I can click one corner and then another corner to define my rectangle. Now that's enough information to proceed. We haven't dimensioned it, but for this video we're simply understanding how the operations work. So I'm going to click the green check to complete the rectangle operation. And that's enough information to complete the extrusion. So I'm going to exit the sketch. And that kicks me back into the boss extrude feature. And it's asking for the height of the extrusion. So I'll make this one shorter. I'll make that one 1/2 inch. And now we can exit the boss extrude by clicking the green check. And we now have two features in our feature manager design tree. I'll undo the showing there. So we have boss extrude 1, which is the base, and boss extrude 2, which is the boss on top of it. You'll notice that the names are shortened to simply boss, simply to save space. So now we have somewhat of an interesting object. We can play with how to view it. So this is where a mouse is very helpful, particularly a 3-button mouse with a scroll wheel. So what I want you to do now is practice using the zoom controls using the scroll wheel. So if I point the mouse at the center of the part and then I scroll, you can see that's my zoom control, and it will zoom to wherever you point the mouse. So if I point the mouse over here, it's going to zoom to that, which of course I don't necessarily want. So point where you want to zoom and then use the wheel to zoom in or out. I find zoom out is usually more conveniently done simply with the zoom to fit button. So that if I've got myself into a weird orientation, something like this, just zoom to fit is the quickest way to get back to so you can see it normally. We can also rotate the view, and that's also done with the middle mouse button or by clicking the mouse wheel. So click the middle mouse wheel down and hold it down, and now you can rotate the model in 3 dimensions. So I rotate it left and right by moving the mouse left and right. This is all with the wheel button held down, and I can go up and down similarly. Another handy control in the heads-up view toolbar is this view orientation pull-down menu. So if you click on the down arrow, you'll get a number of selections about different faces to look at. So these are what are called orthogonal views, square to an axis in other words. So if I were to click that front view, it's going to rotate the view to look squarely at it directly. And there's the top view and so on. If you wanted to get back to an isometric or a 3-dimensional view, then you could click that icon right there, the isometric. It might be called, depending on how you're set up, dimetric or trimetric, but for our purposes there's no distinction. So that goes back to an isometric, or of course you can simply use the middle mouse wheel to rotate, the middle mouse button to rotate. And notice that the triad moves with the object. So that may help you sense the orientation and what those axes mean. Alright, how about we do another extrusion? This one, instead of another boss, let's do a cut. So just as you can extrude material with a boss and base, you can also extrude a cut through the part. Now of course you can't do that until you have something to cut first. So you could not do this as your first operation, but now that we have more than one, or one more than 0, we can do it. So let's click on Extruded Cut, and once again it's asking for a plane to sketch the cross section of the cut. So you could pick any plane you want. I'll pick the top plane arbitrarily. Okay, the plane is now defined. We're in the sketch menu, and now we're ready to draw the cross section of that cut. So I'm going to reorient myself so I can see that better, and I'll do it with the view orientation, and I'll go to the top. Okay, and now I can sketch on this plane. So I could do a rectangle. Why don't I try a circle? So the circle is defined by the center and then an outer point on its radius. So I'll click the circle, and we won't worry about where we're putting it just yet. There's a circle. Now you won't want to go beyond the borders of that plane in this case, because it doesn't make sense to put a hole through a region where there's not material. So since I'm sketching on this plane, let me reorient ourselves, remind us what we're looking at. I want the hole to go through the material, not to go through where there's not material. So I'll just click here to set the hole. If I wanted to set the diameter, I could do that, or the radius would be down here, and there's other ways to do it. But again, we're just doing how the program works. So I'm going to check the green check to complete the circle operation. Now we're back into the sketch menu, and we could do more operations on this if we wanted to. You could put multiple circles in one. So I'll click another circle, and we'll click over here and draw another circle. Okay, and I'll check the green check again to complete that one. Back to sketch. I'll stop here and I'll exit the sketch to get back to the extrusion. So I'm going to click Exit Sketch. Now these are holes, so you can see it knew, since they're holes, it knew to move them into the material as opposed to above the material. And you have different choices for how this hole is accomplished, and so let's play with this a little bit. If you click on the down arrow under direction 1, you can see the default is blind, and that's typically the default. So blind simply means it's going to move a certain amount of distance, and it's not going to have any, it's not going to pay any attention to any features in the model. It's just going to go the distance. But you can set it to pay attention to those features. So for example, you could say through all, and that will automatically go through everything in the model. And you can see these two little holes appeared here, and if I look like this, well, I have to complete the feature for it to see the hole, but those will indeed go all the way through the model. So let me leave it as through all, and I'll hit the green check to complete this cut extrude operation. Okay, now you see in the feature tree, there's the cut extrude that we just did. Remember, we started with that. And if we look on the bottom of the part, sure enough, those are the holes, and they go all the way through. I'm using the middle mouse button again to reorient this view like this. Okay, so that's a little practice with using extruded boss base and extruded cut, simply to understand how the operations work. Some of the main points to pay attention to are, remember, we start with the three-dimensional operation, then it will ask you to find define a plane to work with. Then it will kick you into the sketch menu where you will do your sketching on that surface. You'll hit some green checks to bring yourself back out of the sketch menu, or out of these operations and out of the sketch menu. You'll hit exit sketch, which would appear here, to kick you back into features, and then you do some feature operations. So the main emphasis here is to understand that operation of starting at the top level and then drilling down to a sketch and then walking back up to the top level to complete the feature. And with that, we'll move on to some more sophisticated videos where we'll define parts with specific sizes.